Bear with us. The campaign season really picks up right now in Kansas with this deadline today. There will be primary contests in 3 out of the 4 congressional district races. We'll go in order here. The state's first congressional district, incumbent Tracy Mann, will have a challenger in the primary. That's Eric Bloom of Lawrence. Mann has served in the central and western Kansas district since 2021. The winner will go on to November to face Paul Buskirk, who's running unopposed on the Democratic side. Kansas will have at least one new representative after the November election. That will come in the state's 2nd district, which is currently held by Jake LaTurner, who chose not to seek re-election. Nancy Boyda, a familiar name in that district, is going up against Matt Kleinman on the Democratic side. Boyda has held this seat in the past. Kleinman is a former player for the KU basketball team. The winner there will face one of these 5 candidates: Jeff Kars, a former staff member to Representative LaTurner; Michael Ogle of Topeka; former Kansas Attorney General Derek Schmidt; former president of the Livestock Association Sean Tiffany; and Chad Young of Lawrence. Incumbent Sharice Davids remains unchallenged on the Democratic side in the 3rd congressional district. In November, she'll face the winner of the 2 candidates listed here. The 3rd district represents those up in northeast Kansas. And no primary will be needed in the state's 4th congressional seat. Democrat Esau Freeman is unchallenged on the Democratic side, meaning in November he'll face incumbent Ron Estes, who is also unchallenged on the Republican side.